Jake had always been the guy who preferred his computer screen to crowded parties. Working as a software developer meant long nights fixing code and short days dealing with people. Most folks thought he was boring, but Jake liked his quiet life just fine. That weekend in October changed everything. Jake decided to drive out to the Nevada desert with his camera gear. He wanted to photograph the meteor shower everyone had been talking about. The forecast promised clear skies and no city lights to mess up his shots. He set up camp about 50 miles from the nearest town. The silence felt amazing after weeks of traffic noise and office chatter. As the sun went down, Jake prepared his camera and waited for the sky show to begin. Around midnight, the meteors started streaking across the dark sky. Jake snapped photo after photo, amazed by how bright and colorful they looked. Then something caught his eye that didn't look right. One of the lights wasn't following the same pattern as the others. This light was moving differently. It seemed to slow down, speed up, and change direction. Jake watched through his camera lens, thinking maybe it was just a weird reflection or his eyes playing tricks on him. But then the light started getting bigger and brighter. The object was definitely coming down, and it was coming down fast. Jake grabbed his flashlight and stumbled backward as something crashed into the desert about half a mile away. The impact shook the ground under his feet and sent up a cloud of dust that glowed in the moonlight. His first thought was to call 911. Someone's plane had crashed and they might need help. But his phone showed no signal out here. Jake stood there for a few minutes, heart pounding, trying to decide what to do. The responsible thing would be to drive back to town and get help. But what if someone was hurt and bleeding right now? What if waiting another hour meant the difference between life and death? Jake had always been the careful type, but something inside him said he needed to check it out himself. He grabbed his flashlight, a bottle of water, and his first aid kit from the car. The walk across the desert felt longer than it should have. Every few steps, he stopped to listen, hoping to hear someone calling for help. All he heard was his own breathing and boots crunching on the sand. When Jake reached the crash site, what he saw made no sense. The object wasn't a plane or a helicopter. It looked like someone had taken a teardrop, stretched it out, and covered it in metal that seemed to shift colors in his flashlight beam. Steam rose from various parts of it, and he could hear a low humming sound coming from inside. Jake walked around the thing twice, looking for a door or window or any sign that someone might be trapped inside. Then he heard a sound that made him freeze. It wasn't quite human, but it was definitely someone in pain. The sound came again, louder this time. Jake followed it to what looked like a crack in the side of the craft. As he got closer, the crack widened, revealing darkness inside. He pointed his flashlight through the opening and called out, "Hello, are you okay in there? I'm here to help." Something moved in the darkness. Jake stepped back as a figure emerged from the craft. At first, his brain couldn't process what he was seeing. The person was tall, much taller than Jake, and seemed to be wearing some kind of suit that reflected. His flashlight beamed like water. But as the figure stepped into the moonlight, Jake realized this wasn't a person at all. The being's skin had a silvery blue color that seemed to shimmer and change. Its face was similar to a human's, but more angular, with eyes that looked ancient and intelligent. Jake should have run. Every survival instinct told him to get back to his car and drive away as fast as possible. But the being was clearly hurt, favoring one leg and holding one arm close to its body. When their eyes met, Jake saw something he didn't expect, the same fear he was feeling. The being spoke in a language Jake had never heard, but the tone was gentle, almost apologetic. It raised one hand slowly, as if trying to show it meant no harm. Jake noticed the being's fingers were longer than human fingers, and there seemed to be some kind of technology built into its skin. That pulsed with soft light. "Are you hurt?" Jake asked, knowing the being probably couldn't understand him, but feeling like he had to say something. The being tilted its head and repeated Jake's words back to him, but with an odd accent. Then it pointed to its injured leg and nodded. Jake realized it was trying to learn his language by copying what he said. Against every bit of common sense he had, Jake stepped closer. He pointed to himself and said, "Jake, Then he pointed to the being and waited. The being thought for a moment, then made a sound that was like music and wind chimes combined. It was beautiful, but impossible for Jake to repeat. Seeing his confusion, the being tried again, this time making sounds closer to human speech. Zara, it said finally, the name coming out with a slight whistle. Jake nodded and smiled. Zara. Okay. Nice to meet you, Zara. Over the next hour, using gestures, simple words, and lots of patience, Jake learned that Zara's ship had been damaged by something in space. The crash landing had made things worse, and she was stuck here until repairs could be made. She seemed as surprised to meet Jake as he was to meet her. Jake offered Zara his water and showed her his first aid kit. She examined the bandages with curiosity, then did something that made Jake's jaw drop. She pressed her hand to her injured leg, and the skin began to glow softly. When the glow faded, the wound looked much better. That's incredible, Jake whispered. Zara seemed to understand his amazement. She gestured to her ship and then to the sky, trying to explain where she came from. Jake pointed up at the stars and raised his eyebrows in question. Zara nodded and pointed to a specific area of the night sky. They sat there in the desert sand, two beings from different worlds, trying to communicate with pointing and simple words. Jake should have been terrified, but instead he felt fascinated. Zara seemed genuinely kind, despite being completely alien. As the hours passed, Jake realized that Zara was incredibly intelligent. She picked up English words quickly and started putting them together in basic sentences. She told him she was a scout for her people, studying worlds like Earth from a distance. The crash had been an accident, something about solar interference that Jake didn't fully understand. When the sun started to rise, Jake knew he had to make a decision. He could leave Zara here and pretend this never happened, or he could help her, even though it meant keeping the biggest secret of his life. Looking at Zara sitting there in the morning light, still hurt and clearly worried about her situation, Jake made his choice. He couldn't just abandon someone who needed help, even if that someone wasn't technically human. Come on, he said, standing up and offering Zara his hand. Let's get you somewhere safe while you figure out how to fix your ship. Zara looked at his outstretched hand, then back at his face. Something passed between them in that moment. Understanding that went beyond words, she took his hand and let him help her up. Jake had no idea that this simple act of kindness would change both of their lives forever. He was just a guy who couldn't walk away from someone in trouble. But as they walked back toward his camp together, he felt like he was stepping into a completely new world. The old Jake would have overthought every aspect of this situation. The new Jake, the one who had just met someone from another planet, decided to take things one day at a time and see what happened next. 6 months had passed since that incredible night in the desert. Jake's life had turned into something he never could have imagined. Every evening after work, he would drive to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town where Zara was hiding. While her ship slowly repaired itself, the warehouse had become their secret world. Jake brought supplies, books, and his laptop so Zara could learn about human culture through movies and documentaries. She was amazingly quick at picking up language. What started as simple pointing and single words had grown into real conversations. Zara told Jake incredible stories about her home planet. She described cities that floated in the clouds and oceans that glowed with natural light. Her people lived much longer than humans and spent their time exploring space, learning about other worlds, and protecting planets that couldn't defend themselves. My job, Zara explained one evening while they shared takeout Chinese food, is to watch and learn. My people need to know if other species are ready to meet us. Jake paused with his chopsticks halfway to his mouth. Ready how? Some species destroy themselves before they can travel between stars. Others become dangerous to everyone around them. We watch to see which path each world will take. It was heavy stuff to think about, but Jake found himself looking forward to these conversations more than anything else in his life. Zara had a way of seeing the world that made everything seem more interesting and meaningful. The problem was, Jake wasn't very good at keeping secrets. He had always been the honest type, and hiding such a huge part of his life was getting harder every day. His coworkers started noticing that he seemed distracted during meetings. His neighbor Mrs. Peterson mentioned that he was leaving his apartment at odd hours, but the biggest problem was Ryan. Ryan had worked with Jake at their old tech company before Jake quit to freelance. They had never been close friends, but Ryan had always acted like they were. The truth was, Ryan had always been jealous of Jake's programming skills and the projects he got assigned to. When Jake started his own business, Ryan's jealousy turned into something uglier. He began showing up at places Jake went, asking too many questions about what Jake was working on and who he was spending time with. Jake tried to be polite, but Ryan's behavior was getting weird. "You're different lately," Ryan said one afternoon, cornering Jake at the coffee shop where Jake usually worked on his laptop. "You disappear for hours every night. You're not dating anyone I know about. What's going on?" Jake forced a smile. "Just busy with work, man. You know how it is." But Ryan wasn't buying it. "Come on. We've known each other for years. You can tell me. Are you working on some secret project? Did you get picked up by one of those big companies?" The questions made Jake uncomfortable, but he brushed them off. Ryan was probably just bored with his own job and looking for drama. Jake had bigger things to worry about. Those bigger things included the fact that he was falling in love with someone from another planet. It had happened gradually. At first, Jake was just fascinated by Zara's stories and amazed by her intelligence. Then he started noticing little things about her. The way she listened so carefully when he talked. How she always remembered details about his day and asked thoughtful questions. The genuine concern in her eyes when he mentioned being stressed about work. Zara was kind in a way that felt different from human kindness. She never seemed to judge him or expect him to be anything other than exactly who he was. When Jake made jokes, she would make this sound like wind chimes that meant she found something amusing. When he was having a bad day, she would sit quietly with him until he felt better. The feelings scared Jake sometimes. How do you fall in love with someone who might have to leave at any moment? Zara's ship was getting better every week. Eventually, her people would call her home, and Jake would go back to his normal, boring life. One night, while they were watching a documentary about ocean life, Zara turned to Jake with a serious expression. "My commander contacted me today," she said quietly. Jake's heart sank. "What did they say?" "They want me to return soon. My mission here is supposed to be finished." "What does that mean?" Zara looked down at her hands. "It means I need to make my report about humans. Whether your species is ready for contact or if you need more time to develop." Jake felt a knot forming in his stomach. "And what are you going to tell them?" "I don't know anymore," Zara admitted. "When I first came here, I thought I understood humans from our long-distance observations. But knowing you has changed everything. You showed me kindness when you could have run away or tried to hurt me. You kept my secret even, though it put you at risk." Jake reached over and took her hand. Her skin always felt slightly warm and had a texture like smooth metal. "Not all humans are like me, Zara. Some would react very differently." "I know. That's what makes this so complicated." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, both lost in their own thoughts. Jake couldn't imagine his life without their evening conversations. Zara had become his best friend and something more, even though he wasn't sure what to call it. Meanwhile, Ryan's behavior was getting more concerning. He had started following Jake's car at a distance, trying to see where Jake went every night. He had also been asking Jake's other acquaintances questions about any changes they had noticed in Jake's behavior. Jake didn't realize how serious Ryan's obsession had become until Mrs. Peterson mentioned it during a chance meeting at the grocery store. "That friend of yours has been asking a lot of questions," she said while examining apples. "The one with the shifty eyes. He wanted to know what time you leave every night and if you ever bring anyone home." A chill ran down Jake's spine. "What did you tell him?" "Nothing, dear. I don't like people who snoop around asking about their neighbors, but you might want to be careful. He seemed very interested in your personal business." That night, Jake told Zara about Ryan's strange behavior. Her reaction surprised him. Instead of seeming worried, she became very still and alert, like a cat that had spotted something dangerous. "This person knows you well enough to notice changes in your routine?" she asked. "We used to work together. He's always been a bit weird, but this is different." Zara stood up and began pacing around the warehouse. "My people have protocols for this kind of situation. If someone becomes suspicious of our presence, we have ways to handle it." "What kind of ways?" "Nothing harmful," Zara said quickly, seeing the concern on Jake's face. "But we can't let your secret be discovered. It would be dangerous for both of us." Jake felt the weight of their situation settling on his shoulders. He had thought keeping Zara's existence secret was just about protecting her. Now he realized it was about protecting himself too. If the wrong people found out about his contact with an alien, there was no telling what might happen to either of them. "What should we do?" Jake asked. Zara stopped pacing and looked at him with those ancient, intelligent eyes. "We watch him carefully, and we prepare for the possibility that our time together might be ending sooner than we hoped." The thought of losing Zara made Jake's chest tight with anxiety. He had found something incredible, something that had changed his entire perspective on life and his place in the universe. The idea that it might all disappear because of Ryan's jealousy and nosiness felt unbearably unfair. But as Jake looked at Zara standing there in the dim warehouse light, he realized something important. She wasn't just some helpless alien who needed his protection. There was strength in her posture and intelligence in her eyes that reminded him that she came from a civilization far more advanced than his own. Whatever happened with Ryan, Jake had a feeling that Zara was much better equipped to handle dangerous situations than he was. Jake's worst fears became reality on a Tuesday evening in March. He was heading to the warehouse as usual when his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The message contained a single video file and 3 words that made his blood run cold. "Call me tonight." With shaking hands, Jake opened the video. The footage was grainy and taken from a distance, but it was clear enough. There was Zara walking from her ship to the warehouse in her natural form. Her skin shimmered in the moonlight, and her height made it obvious she wasn't human. The timestamp showed it was from 3 nights ago. Jake pulled over to the side of the road and called the number. Ryan answered on the first ring. Well, finally ready to talk. "Buddy, Ryan, what do you want?" Jake's voice came out as barely a whisper. "What do I want? That's a great question." Ryan's tone was different now. Gone was the fake friendliness Jake was used to. This voice was cold and calculating. "I want to know what the heck you've been hiding from me for months. More importantly, I want to know what that thing is." Jake's mind raced, trying to think of some explanation that might work. "I don't know what you're talking about." Ryan laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Don't play dumb with me. I've been watching you for weeks, following you to that old warehouse. I saw you talking to that, whatever it is. That's not human, Jake. That's not even close to human." The confirmation that Ryan had been spying on him made Jake feel sick to his stomach. "You're crazy. You're seeing things that aren't there." "Am I? Then you won't mind if I send this video to a few news stations. Maybe the police. I bet they'd be very interested to know what kind of experiments you've been running in that warehouse." Jake felt the world spinning around him. "Ryan, please. You don't understand what you're getting into." "Oh, I understand perfectly. You found something incredible, and you decided to keep it all to yourself. Just like always, Jake. Just like when you got all the best projects at work. Just like when you started your own company and left the rest of us behind." The jealousy in Ryan's voice was obvious now, but there was something else too, something desperate. "What do you want from me? Money? $500,000? Jake almost dropped the phone. "Are you insane? I don't have that kind of money." "Then you better figure out how to get it, because if you don't, this video goes viral. And trust me, Jake, once the government gets involved, both you and your alien friend are going to disappear permanently." The line went dead. Jake sat in his car, hands shaking, trying to process what had just happened. Ryan wasn't just being nosy anymore. This was blackmail, pure and simple. And the worst part was, Ryan was probably right about what would happen if the authorities found out. Jake had read enough conspiracy theories and government documents to know that people who claim contact with extraterrestrials often vanish without a trace. Whether those stories were true or not, he couldn't take the risk, not with Zara's life on the line. For the next week, Jake tried desperately to handle the situation alone. He called his bank about loans, looked into selling his car and computer equipment, even considered asking his parents for money without telling them why. But even if he liquidated everything he owned, he could maybe come up with $50,000. It was nowhere near enough. The stress was destroying him. Jake couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, and could barely concentrate on his work. Dark circles appeared under his eyes, and he lost 15 pounds in 10 days. His hands developed a constant tremor from anxiety. Worse yet, he started avoiding Zara. He made excuses about being busy with work, about having family obligations. The lies came easier each day, but they made him hate himself. Zara was the most important person in his life, and he was shutting her out when she needed to understand what was happening. Ryan wasn't making things easier. He called Jake every few days with updates on his deadline. Sometimes he would drive by Jake's apartment just to remind him that he was being watched. Once, Jake came home to find Ryan sitting on his doorstep. "Tick-tock, buddy," Ryan said with a smile that made Jake's skin crawl. "2 weeks left. Hope you're making progress on getting my money." "This is insane, Ryan. Even if I could get that much money, what makes you think I'd give it to you? What's to stop you from asking for more next month?" Ryan shrugged. "Nothing, I guess, but that's a problem for future Jake to worry about. Right now, present Jake needs to focus on keeping himself and his alien girlfriend alive." The casual way Ryan talked about their lives being in danger made Jake realize how serious this had become. This wasn't just about money anymore. Ryan seemed to enjoy having power over Jake, and people like that rarely stopped at just one payment. By the third week, Jake was falling apart. His work suffered so much that clients started complaining. He missed appointments, delivered projects late, and made mistakes he never would have made before. The business he had worked so hard to build was crumbling along with everything else in his life. That's when Zara finally confronted him. Jake was sitting in the warehouse, staring at his laptop screen without really seeing it, when Zara sat down beside him. She had been giving him space for weeks, but apparently she had reached her limit. "Something is very wrong," she said simply. "You are sick, but not with any illness I recognize. You are afraid, but you won't tell me why. This is not like you." Jake looked at her concerned face and felt his carefully constructed walls crumble. The whole story came pouring out. The video, the blackmail, the impossible amount of money Ryan wanted, the threats about what would happen if Jake didn't pay. Zara listened without interrupting, but Jake could see her expression changing. By the time he finished talking, she looked completely different. The gentle, curious being he had grown to love was gone, replaced by someone who looked like they were calculating the most efficient way to solve a very serious problem. "This person threatens both our lives for money?" she asked quietly. Jake nodded miserably. "I tried to handle it myself. I thought maybe I could find a way to pay him off or convince him to leave us alone. But I can't raise that much money, and even if I could, he'd probably just ask for more." Zara stood up and began pacing the warehouse floor. Her movements were different now, more controlled and purposeful. "On my world, we have laws about people who threaten others for personal gain. The penalties are severe. This isn't your world, though, and we can't exactly go to the police about this." Zara stopped pacing and looked at Jake with an expression he had never seen before. There was something ancient and powerful in her eyes, something that reminded him that she came from a civilization that had mastered space travel, when humans were still discovering fire. "Jake," she said calmly, "I need you to understand something about my people. When I told you I was a scout, you assumed that meant I was just an observer. But scouts for my people are also protectors. We are trained to handle situations exactly like this one." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. What kind of training? The kind that ensures threats to peaceful contact are neutralized efficiently and permanently. The way she said permanently made Jake's blood run cold. "Zara, you can't hurt him. That would just make everything worse. Zara tilted her head, studying Jake's face. You still think of me as someone who needs your protection. But I am not helpless, Jake. I am not some lost visitor who stumbled onto your world by accident. I am a warrior trained from childhood to handle exactly these types of dangerous situations. Jake stared at her, seeing Zara clearly for the first time since they had met. He had been so focused on her curiosity and gentleness that he had forgotten she came from a species advanced enough to travel between stars. Such a civilization would not send unprepared individuals to study potentially hostile worlds. What are you going to do? He asked. Zara's expression softened slightly as she saw the worry in his eyes. Nothing that will bring harm to innocent people. But this Ryan has made a serious mistake. He threatens someone under my protection, and he threatens the security of my people's operations. That cannot be allowed to continue. Jake felt a mixture of relief and fear. Relief that he wasn't facing this nightmare alone anymore, and fear of what Zara might be capable of when she decided. Someone was a threat. Trust me, Zara said, placing her hand gently on his shoulder. Tomorrow, your Ryan problem will no longer exist. The next morning, Jake woke up feeling like he hadn't slept in weeks. Even though Zara had promised to handle the Ryan situation, he couldn't shake the worry that things were about to get much worse. He had no idea what Zara was planning, and that scared him almost as much as Ryan's threats. Zara had left the warehouse early, telling Jake she needed to gather information. She said it in the same calm tone she used to discuss the weather, but something in her eyes had changed completely. The gentle being who asked endless questions about human movies and food had been replaced by someone who moved with deadly purpose. Jake tried to go about his normal routine, but concentration was impossible. He kept checking his phone, expecting another threatening call from Ryan. Instead, around noon, Ryan called sounding confused and nervous. Jake, something weird is happening. To my stuff, Ryan said without his usual cocky attitude. What do you mean? My computer keeps shutting down by itself. My phone deleted all my photos. Even my car radio is playing nothing but static. It's like everything electronic around me is going crazy. Jake felt a chill. Maybe you should take your stuff to a repair shop. All of it broke at the same time. That doesn't just happen, Jake. And there's something else. I keep getting phone calls, but when I answer, nobody's there, except I swear I can hear breathing that doesn't sound human. Jake didn't know what to say. Part of him felt bad for Ryan, but he remembered the threats and the sleepless nights of terror. Maybe you're just stressed out, Jake. Last night I had the most realistic nightmare of my life. I dreamed I was being watched by something with glowing eyes. When I woke up, my bedroom window was open, and I know I locked it before bed. The call ended abruptly, leaving Jake staring at his phone. Whatever Zara was doing, it was working. But Jake couldn't help feeling uneasy about the methods she was using. That evening, Jake arrived at the warehouse to find Zara studying multiple glowing screens that definitely hadn't been there before. The displays showed maps, photographs, and what looked like detailed information about Ryan's entire life. How did you get all this? Jake asked, amazed by the amount of information. My people have been monitoring your planet's electronic systems for decades. Zara explained matter-of-factly. Every phone call, every internet search, every financial transaction. It's all recorded and analyzed. Jake felt uncomfortable learning that his privacy had been an illusion his entire life, but bigger concerns took priority. What have you been doing to Ryan? Zara gestured to one of the screens showing Ryan's apartment building. Phase 1 was psychological pressure. I disrupted his electronic devices and created experiences designed to make him question his mental stability. Phase 2 begins tonight. Phase 2, instead of answering. Zara walked to a part of the warehouse Jake had never seen her access before. A section of the wall slid away, revealing equipment that looked like it belonged in a science fiction movie. Zara began putting on what Jake could only describe as armor, but it was unlike anything he had ever imagined. The material looked like liquid metal that formed itself to Zara's body. As she put it on, it began to glow with soft blue light that pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. When she was fully suited up, she looked like a warrior from an advanced civilization. Beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Zara, what are you planning to do? I'm going to have a conversation with Ryan. After tonight, he will understand that threatening us was the biggest mistake of his life. Jake followed Zara outside, where her ship was no longer hidden under its camouflage field. In the moonlight, it looked like a work of art made from starlight and dreams. Zara moved toward it with fluid grace, every step demonstrating power that Jake was only beginning to understand. I want to come with you, Jake said suddenly. Zara stopped and turned to face him. This is not something humans should witness. He's threatening me too. I have a right to be there. After a long moment, Zara nodded. Stay behind me at all times. Do not interfere no matter what you see or hear. The ship's interior was even more incredible than Jake had imagined. Everything seemed to be made of the same flowing, living metal as Zara's armor. As they flew silently through the night sky, toward Ryan's apartment, Jake watched displays that showed them approaching their target with precision. That would have made military pilots jealous. They landed on the roof of Ryan's building without making a sound. Zara moved to the edge and looked down at Ryan's apartment window. Then she did something that made Jake's jaw drop. She simply stepped off the roof and fell for stories, landing on Ryan's fire escape without making any noise. Jake watched from above as Zara approached Ryan's bedroom window. Through the glass, they could see Ryan sitting at his computer, probably trying to figure out why all his electronics were malfunctioning. Zara tapped gently on the window. Ryan looked up, saw her standing there in full warrior gear, and fell backward out of his chair. Jake could hear his scream even from the rooftop. Zara calmly opened the window and stepped inside. Good evening, Ryan, she said in a voice that carried clearly in the night air. We need to talk. Jake couldn't see everything that happened next, but he could hear Ryan's terrified voice and Zara's calm responses. She spoke to him for exactly 10 minutes, during which Ryan's protests and threats gradually turned into whimpering and desperate apologies. When Zara emerged from the apartment, she looked completely relaxed, as if she had just finished a pleasant conversation with an old friend. What did you say to him? Jake asked when they were back in the ship. I explained the situation from his perspective and from mine. I showed him examples of what happens to people who threaten my species or our allies. I demonstrated some of the technology available to me if he chooses to continue his current path. Did you hurt him? I didn't need to. Sometimes showing someone exactly how helpless they are is more effective than causing physical pain. Jake felt relief mixed with a new understanding of who Zara really was. She wasn't just an alien visitor learning about humans. She was a representative of a civilization so advanced that they could end human civilization without breaking a sweat, and she had been holding back her true nature throughout their entire relations. Hip, will he leave us alone now? Ryan will never speak about what he has seen or learned. In fact, he will forget most of it by morning, but he will retain enough memory to ensure he never bothers either of us again. Jake stared at Zara, seeing her clearly for the first time. You could have done this from the beginning. Why did you let me suffer for weeks? Zara's expression softened as she removed her armor. Because you needed to make the choice to trust me with the truth, and I needed to understand how far you would go to protect me, even when you thought I was helpless. As they flew back to the warehouse, Jake realized that his relationship with Zara had fundamentally changed. She wasn't someone who needed his protection. She was someone powerful enough to protect him. And she had chosen to do so. But that raised new questions about what she wanted from him, and what their future together might look like now that he understood who she really was. The days following Zara's visit to Ryan passed in a strange calm that Jake had almost forgotten was possible. Ryan didn't call, didn't show up at Jake's apartment, and seemed to have completely disappeared from his life. Jake should have felt relieved, but instead he found himself wondering what exactly Zara had done to make Ryan vanish so completely. 3 days later, Jake got his answer when he ran into Mrs. Peterson at the grocery store again. You know, that strange friend of yours came by yesterday, she mentioned while examining tomatoes. The one who was asking all those questions about you. Jake's heart skipped. What did he want this time? That's the odd thing. He seemed completely different, very polite, very apologetic. He said he had been going through some personal problems and wanted to apologize for bothering everyone with his questions. Then he asked me to give you this. She handed Jake a sealed envelope with his name written in Ryan's shaky handwriting. Inside was a short note that made Jake's blood run cold. Jake, I don't remember everything that happened, but I know I made a terrible mistake. I'm moving across the country to start over. I deleted the video in all copies. I will never contact you again. I'm sorry for everything. Ryan. That evening, Jake showed the note to Zara. She read it without any expression, then handed it back to him. He's telling the truth, she said simply. The psychological conditioning I use will prevent him from ever speaking about what he learned, but it won't harm him in any other way. He can live a normal life as long as he stays away from us. Jake felt a mixture of relief and unease. What exactly did you do to him? I showed him the truth about the universe and his place in it. Humans aren't the dominant species you believe yourselves to be. You're not even close. When someone truly understands how small and fragile they are, they usually become much more careful about making threats. The way Zara said it made Jake realize how different their perspectives really were. To him, Ryan had been a serious threat that could have destroyed both their lives. To Zara, Ryan had been nothing more than a minor inconvenience that needed to be managed. But their Ryan problem being solved created a new question that Jake had been avoiding for months. What happened next? The answer came 2 weeks later when Jake arrived at the warehouse to find 3 figures waiting. With Zara, they were clearly from her species, tall and elegant with the same shimmering skin, but they wore formal clothing that seemed to be made of starlight itself. Jake, Zara said as he approached nervously, I'd like you to meet my commander and 2 members of our council. The introductions were surreal. Jake found himself shaking hands with beings who had traveled across the galaxy and possessed technology that could solve most of humanity's problems overnight. They spoke perfect English and treated Jake with respect that surprised him. We've been monitoring the situation with the human who threatened you, the commander explained. Zara's handling of the crisis was exemplary. She protected our mission, while also protecting someone she cares about. Jake glanced at Zara, who was looking at the ground with what might have been embarrassment. More importantly, one of the council members added, Your behavior during this crisis has been enlightening. You chose to protect Zara even when doing so put you at considerable personal risk. That suggests a level of maturity that we rarely see in your species. Jake didn't know how to respond to that. I just did what anyone would do. No, the commander said firmly, you did what very few humans would do. Which brings us to why we're here. The next are change Jake's life forever. The council explained that they had been watching Earth for over a century, waiting for signs that humanity was ready for contact with other species. Most of their observations had been discouraging. Humans seemed too aggressive, too divided, and too focused on short-term thinking to be trusted with knowledge of alien civilizations. But Jake's relationship with Zara had provided them with new data. Here was a human who had encountered an alien being and chosen friendship over fear, protection over profit, and love over personal safety. We would like to offer you a choice. The commander said, you can return to your normal life with your memories of Zara modified to remove any trace of our existence. You'll remember her as a friend who moved away, nothing more. You'll be safe, and you'll never have to worry about keeping our secret. Again, Jake felt his heart sinking. Or, you can come with us, become an ambassador between our species and yours. Help us determine whether humanity is ready for contact, and if so, how that contact should be established. The offer was so far beyond anything Jake had ever imagined that he couldn't process it at first. Leave Earth, travel to other worlds, become part of something bigger than anything humans had ever dreamed of. What about my life here? My work? My family? Your family will be told that you've been offered an amazing opportunity to work overseas. Zara explained gently, they'll receive regular communications from you. Your business can be maintained through remote work, at least initially. Jake looked around at the 4 alien beings watching him expectantly. A few months ago, his biggest concern had been debugging code and paying rent. Now he was being offered a chance to help shape the future of human civilization. How long would I be gone? That depends on many factors, the commander answered. The initial assignment would be 5 of your years. After that, you could choose to return to Earth or continue working with us. Jake's mind raced with questions and doubts. Could he really leave everything he knew behind? Could he adapt to life among beings so much more advanced than himself? What if he made mistakes that affected the future of his entire species? But as he looked at Zara, he realized that the most important question was much simpler. Could he go back to his old life knowing that she was somewhere among the stars, and that he had chosen the safe, familiar path instead of the extraordinary one? If I go with you, what exactly would I be doing? Learning, Zara said with a smile. Learning about other worlds, other species, other ways of thinking and living. You'd help us understand which humans might be ready for contact, and you'd help prepare humanity for the changes that contact would bring. And Zara would be there? I've been assigned as your guide and partner, Zara confirmed. We work well together. Jake realized that this was what he had been unconsciously hoping for since the night he first met Zara. Not just a chance to be with her, but a chance to be part of something meaningful, something that could make a real difference in the universe. When will we leave? Tonight, if you choose to come. Jake thought about his apartment, his clients, his quiet life of routine and predictability. Then he thought about the incredible conversations he'd had with Zara, the way she had opened his eyes to possibilities he'd never imagined, and the way she had protected him when he needed it most. I'll need to make some arrangements, he said finally. Send some emails, pay some bills. The commander smiled. Is that a yes? Jake looked at Zara, who was watching him with hope and affection in her ancient eyes. Yeah, he said, feeling simultaneously terrified and exhilarated. That's a yes. 2 hours later, Jake stood in the warehouse for the last time, a small bag of personal items in his hand. Everything else had been handled by technology beyond his understanding. His clients had received professional explanations, his bills were paid, and his family had been contacted about his new overseas opportunity. As Zara's ship lifted silently into the night sky, Jake watched his hometown disappear below him. He was leaving behind everything familiar and safe for a future he couldn't even imagine. But as Zara took his hand and pointed out the viewport, toward stars that would soon become destinations rather than distant lights, Jake realized he had never felt more alive or more certain that he was exactly where he belonged.